This evening, voters will receive their early ballots and begin voting in less than 2 weeks from today. After Arizonans were promised a 2-page ballot this November, we're taking a look at over 15 propositions you need to know before Election Day. And with just about a month to go until the election, how are Kari and Ruben Gallego faring in the polls? This is Before You Vote. Welcome, I'm Mike Broomhead. I want to talk about the importance of making sure you understand the propositions before you vote. Wording can be confusing. As a matter of fact, 2 of the propositions cancel each other out. So understanding the wording and what a yes or a no vote means for you is very important. You have to know the difference of what your yes or no vote might do. The reason why that's important is it takes a 2/3 majority to overturn any of these initiatives that pass. A 2/3 majority of both the House and the Senate. So changes are difficult to make. Now, stay with us. We're helping you understand all of the statewide ballot measures next. We'll be back here on Before You Vote in exactly 60 seconds. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining me is the Executive Director from Clean Elections, Tom Collins. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
I've been here for 30 years. I don't think I've ever seen this many ballot initiatives on one ballot. Is this the biggest we've ever seen?
This is the biggest since 2006. And 2006 was 19. We're at about, when you add in local, we're getting up to 15, 16.
Yeah, so I don't remember that in 06, but this one is huge. So I want to go through some of these so voters understand what a yes or a no vote on some of the big ones. We're never going to get to all of them.
Sure.
Let's start with 139,
sure.
The initiative that everybody's talking about with rights to abortion in Arizona.
Sure.
Can you explain what a yes or no vote means on this?
Sure. So what a yes vote would do is enshrine a right to abortion in the state constitution. What that means practically is that the legislature can't take it away. It creates a new law that says through the point of viability, the legislature can't really regulate the area unless it's to protect the health of the patient, and meets a number of other criteria, and it has to be the least restrictive means, right? So that's what that says, and that's what's the main bulk of what's going to be enshrined.
Yeah, and so what I like about, and I should have prefaced with this, is that you are not here to advocate for or against anything, but it's your job to make sure it's defined and described clearly.
We try to make sure that when folks go to our website, like when they go to other government websites, that they can get information about what's on their ballot. That's fair to give them.
So Prop 314,
sure.
The initiative that everybody's talking about when it comes to the border, can you describe what that is? Because there's more than just one phase in this, or one thing in it.
Yeah, so Prop 314 basically says a couple of things. It says if you enter Arizona, unlawfully, not through a port of entry, right, you've committed a crime. It also says that if you've been ordered by a court to leave, by a state court to leave, you've got to, and if you don't, that's another crime. It also creates a couple new crimes around if you were here and you're undocumented, you lied to get employment or you lied to get public benefits. Those are crimes, and then it also enhances penalties for fentanyl. If you are distributing fentanyl and it leads to a death, it will create an enhanced penalty there.
Are there penalties in there for employers that hire people? Is there anything addressed in that there?
This law is really focused on the person who's there. The
border crosser.
Yeah, and it basically says that person is going to end up, if they're arrested or convicted, is going to end up with some kind of term in jail or prison. And then ultimately the idea would be that the person would get, would leave. So 133 and 140 both deal with primaries, but kind of cancel each other out. Right.
Am I right about that?
Yeah. So 140 is what goes by Make Elections Fair, if you see the signs. And 140 does a couple of different things, but one of the main things it does is it creates an open primary. What that means is regardless of party, everybody has to get the same number of signatures to get on the ballot, and everybody gets treated equally on that primary ballot, right? 133, which was put on by the legislature, says not for partisan offices, we want to have partisan primaries, and the party that wins the candidate of the party they get on the general election ballot. So yeah, that's exactly right. They're opposites of one another.
Because I know that in 140 it doesn't pick how it makes the legislature decide how many people get on the general election ballot and all those things.
That's right.
But in theory, you could have 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans or one of each, depending on who gets the votes.
Yeah.
And that's what 133 is saying. We're going to keep it the way it is, that it's a partisan election, top vote getter in a party.
That's exactly right.
So if somebody goes in confused on this, and they look at 133 and say, oh, that's a good idea,
right,
and they vote yes, and then they get to 140, and they say, I think that's a good idea, and I vote yes, I've just canceled out my own vote.
Right. Well, technically what you created is a situation where if both pass, the highest vote getter, if there's a conflict, the courts will have to figure out which lasts. But on the primary piece, which is just that piece, those two are diametrically opposed.
All right, what about 134, proposed amendment about relating to initiatives and referenda?
Right, so what this says is right now, if you want to put an initiative on the ballot, you need to collect a certain percentage of qualified voters' signatures. You can do that in any part of the state, but you can come to Maricopa or Pima County. The legislature says, you know what, we want to have it distributed, so it would require you to get that percentage from every single legislative district.
Yeah, it seems a little in the weeds, but again, another one that's really important. What about 312 and property taxes? Why are we voting about property taxes?
Right, so what this says is if you can show that a city or county is not taking care of public nuisances, you know, vagrancy, drunkenness, that kind of thing, and that's costing you money as you're a property owner, you can apply to the Department of Revenue for a rebate on your property taxes, and that comes out of the city's revenue.
Is there a court, do you have to go to court for it, or is that mandated in this proposal?
Yeah, it's really an application through the DOR with your taxes.
All right, so let's take a look at the judicial retention.
Sure.
Can you explain what this, and what is that is 137, I think?
Sure, absolutely. So in Arizona, since for the last 30, 40 years, we have had what's called judicial retention for appellate courts, Supreme Court, and the bigger county superior courts. And what that means is those judges go through merit selection, they get screened by a panel, and then they get appointed by the governor, and then they stand for retention every 4 or 6 years. At the back of your ballot, you're going to see 40 or 50 names of judges. Those judges are the judges up for retention. Now, in the last couple of years, there have been some judges who've been unretained. There's been a lot more political attention to that. And the folks who put Prop 137 in front of you are saying, that means we're getting too political. Retention and merit selection was designed to make our judiciary less political, because prior to that, we actually just elected judges on an RD ballot, right?
Correct.
We want to get rid of that. They want to secure that. The opponents, on the other hand, are saying, really what you're doing is you're taking away an accountability from the judges and the justices. You're taking away the ability of the voters to have a say in who continues to be on the bench.
All right, so as you can see, these are so important because your vote is going to make big changes in some areas if you vote yes or no on a lot of these. So we've got more to go over with this, some of the important initiatives that are on the ballot. We have another segment to do this in, so please stay where you are. Now, don't go anywhere. There are more propositions to cover, including one about the governor. But first, Arizona's U.S. Senate race has been a national conversation. Find out what the polls are showing just 1 month away from Election Day. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. This is our Tracking Arizona segment where we look into the election. Big election being paid attention to across the country is the United States Senate race with Republican candidate Kari and Democrat candidate Ruben Gallego. Now, what's interesting about this, and my favorite part about this poll, is that Arizona's demographic has shifted dramatically and very quickly, with independent or party non-declared voters making up a huge part of the electorate, which would seem like that's where the battle would be for these independent voters. Joining us now to hash out who's in front and why, from Noble Predictive Insights, Mike Noble. Mike, welcome back.
Hey, good to be back, Mike.
So this interests me because you would think it would be hardline Republican, Democrat fighting over the independent voters, but you have Ruben Gallego with a lead, but a smaller lead than he had just recently.
And the polling right now, so there's been about roughly 30 public polls put out in this race. We had Ruben up 10 before, right now 7, well within the margin. If you look at the averages right now of all the polls out there, it shows Ruben's ahead by about 7 points over Lake. And so right now in this race is that the big thing to look at is that Ruben has done a good job of consolidating his base among the Democrats. Kari Lake, though, when it comes to Republicans, you can see she has some issues still with her base. So some of those more McCain, more moderate wing of the party, she still has some wounds to heal over there. But her real big problem right now in Arizona is among independent voters. And you notice Ruben has almost a 2-to-1 advantage with independent voters, which just a decade ago, that group leaned to the right. And one last quick thing on it, Arizona has had some changes, et cetera, demographically. But here's the thing, in that same poll, Trump was ahead of Harris by 3 points. Generically, was Republicans ahead by 1 point, but yet in this matchup between Ruben and Lake's down 7.
So when you look at this, the demographics, does Kari Lake have a shot? Does she need to go after the independents, or is she better off just trying to shore up her base with Republicans to cut into that lead?
She has to do both. Frankly, both. Yeah, it was interesting. She has a two-headed problem right there. So one, she needs to shore up those conservative Republicans. I think there's some trust loss. So you've seen some overtures there, but she needs to stay the course because there's still some pain points there. But really among the independents is how can she moderate her view a bit more? So maybe talking less about issues we know 76% of independents don't agree with, like let's say the election was stolen. I mean, it's a great base issue, but for that all-important moderate wing of the voter, you have to kind of change that. And I think for her also showing a clear vision for what she's running for. Because we've done a ton of focus groups and surveys. I try to ask folks, like, what is Lake's vision for that? And no one can really articulate that. So I think there's some windows of opportunity there for her.
As always, Mike, I appreciate the insight.
Thank you.
All right, this is our Tracking Arizona segment. We'll be right back on Before You Vote. Are you prepared to vote on over 20 propositions this November? We're talking about what you need to know for the statewide ballot measures next. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. In the middle of our conversation about ballot initiatives with the Executive Director of Clean Elections, let's go to 138, because 138 has to do with tipped workers and minimum wage.
Yeah.
What does this mean if you vote yes or no?
Sure. So what this is going to do is two things. First, it's going to put the way we handle tipped workers into the Arizona Constitution. So that will mean the legislature can't change that around, and it'll also make it harder for the voters to change that around as they have with minimum wage and stuff like that. The other thing it does is it says that the employer can take 25% off from the minimum wage of the tipped worker, provided that over the pay period they end up at $2 better than minimum wage. So if the minimum wage is $10, they get to knock it down to $7.50, provided over the pay period you get to $12.
With the taxable tips.
Yes, that's right.
And so that initiative seems confusing at first glance, and depending on who you talk to in the industry, but it's something that's important because it's going to be enshrined about wages in Arizona, and it's going to be tough to change.
Yes.
All right, let's go to 311. It deals with first responders.
Sure. So what this says is that, first responders are obviously putting their lives at risk, and the legislature has passed this to the voters that says there's going to be a $250,000 death benefit to a spouse or child of a first responder who's killed in the line of duty, and it's going to be paid for by a $20 fee on people who have criminal convictions. And then if there's extra money, that money goes into police training and other law enforcement type of programs.
So anybody then, it would be affecting people that are convicted of crimes that when they're paying their restitution and fines, part of it will have a $20 surcharge, so to speak, that would go to this fund.
Yeah, the other thing it does is it enhances the penalties for an aggravated assault on a first responder. So if you simple aggravated assault where you know the person's a first responder, that gets moved from a class 5 to a class 4 felony, and if it causes an injury, it moves from a class 4 to a class 3 felony.
All right, so Prop 135, which deals with emergency powers in the governor, where did this come from and what does it do?
So anybody might recall during the height of COVID, Governor Ducey and governors and mayors across the country took actions to try to, stop the spread. We all kind of remember that, right? And there was a lot of pushback about that. There was litigation, business owners saying, hey, I'm trying to make a living here, workers saying, I got to make a living here. And so the legislature in reviewing that says, you know what, we ought to have a review on this. So after 30 days, unless it's a wartime thing or a flood or a fire, right, we ought to have after 30 days it should expire unless we re-up it as the legislature.
So it's almost like war powers to a president.
That's a good analogy, yes.
Yeah, so it limits that, it makes sure and I want to be pro or con on it, but it is saying that the governor has the ability to move quickly.
Yeah.
But after 30 days, the legislature then has to act on the continuation.
That's correct.
Okay, that's a great explanation. All right, let's talk about 313, which is sentencing for sex trafficking, child sex trafficking.
Right. So child sex trafficking is really every aspect of that you can think of. It's the financing, the transportation, all that stuff. And what this does is currently under law, the sentences around that, which are pretty severe, but they're imposed based on the age, the circumstances, those kind of things. This says a natural life sentence if you're convicted of child sex trafficking, period.
So it is a minimum mandatory.
That's right.
No way you're getting out.
Right, that's right.
All right, so the voters are going to have their say. I want to talk about a couple of the really what people would consider kind of in the weeds, wonky ones,
Sure,
but
sure.
Everybody's still got to vote and has to understand. Let's talk about 136,
Right.
where it comes to the legislature and ballot measures.
Right. So this
this is your wheelhouse.
Right. So this is very interesting, right? So in Arizona right now, you'll see if you read the paper or you listen to your show or watch your show, people litigate about these ballot measures. This one says we're going to not just litigate the signatures and all that stuff. We're going to litigate whether or not the measure itself is constitutional. Current law in Arizona is you don't do that unless it passes. This would say no, you get to do that up front when the measure gets submitted. People can go to court and challenge its constitutionality before people even vote on it. And the argument sort of against it is, hey, that's going to bog us down. We're not going to get good opinions. And why should we do this if we don't even know if it's going to pass? The argument on the other side is, we're going to spend a lot of money and people's time on this. We ought to know if it's constitutional up front.
And so, yeah, I think that when you read it initially, my eyes kind of,
Yeah.
but you work in this world.
Yeah.
This is a decision that's a very important decision.
This would affect the way that folks both bring initiatives and try to argue about them for sure.
So it's one that people need to really do their homework on.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about 315, which is rulemaking. Now,
Yeah.
I looked at this again, and I thought you're the perfect guy to talk to about it.
Well, I don't know how to take that, but
because you're in this world every day.
I know. So anyway, so this one is kind of interesting. What it says is if agencies pass regulations all the time. The legislature says, you agency, you get to you're the experts. You pass the rules on how we're going to have hospitals regulated or ambulances regulated, all that kind of stuff. This says if your regulation costs more than $500,000 to implement over 5 years, the legislature is going to have to ratify that before that rule can take effect. So the pro argument is the legislature, not the agencies, are elected, and the legislature, not the agencies, should be the final word. The con argument is you have these agencies that are in the nitty-gritty day-to-day. They're working with the stakeholders. They understand the situation, and they're going to be working to promote public health and safety, and this is going to be an impediment.
And and it's also bureaucracy.
That's right.
That's the argument against.
That's right.
Voters that vote early are going to have more time,
Yes.
cup of coffee.
Right.
But if you go to the polls, you got 4 pages to look at.
Yeah.
Where do voters go
Yeah.
to, outside of this conversation, where do they go to get the information on the initiatives they're going to vote on?
So there's a couple of different places. They can always go to the Clean Elections website, azcleanelections.gov. We've got information on your candidates, how to vote, and ballot measures. We're even featuring this year. We have a few debates on some of the high-profile issues that are on the ballot. Obviously, you can also go to the Secretary's website, azsos.gov. There you can find that publicity pamphlet in electronic form, and they do town halls where folks are there from their staff, and people who are pro and con on these initiatives are out there talking to folks.
Listen, this is so important, and we kind of raced through these to get through all of them, and I'm glad that we did because it's such an important election cycle,
Sure.
as they all are, but it's rare that we have this many decisions being made by the voters.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the time and your hard work at Clean Elections, and thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, you be an informed voter, be an educated voter, and this is just one step in that process. You've got a lot of important decisions to make. Make sure you make the ones that are right for you in an educated way. We'll be back. Thank you to Tom Collins with Arizona Clean Elections and pollster Mike Noble for joining us this week. All of our past interviews are on cw7az.com/vote. If you missed an episode or want to rewatch any of them, head over there for more information. The general election debates kicked off at the beginning of September. You can head over to our website to watch all of them as they happen. We'll see you next Sunday right here on Before You Vote.